Okay, so welcome to my presentation. My name is Anca. I am the CEO and founder of Strategic and Pharma, and we are the creators of Clinical Maestro, which is the industry's premier solution for managing clinical business operations. I'm here today to bring you a little sparkle, as you can see in my blouse, and take you on a journey to the future age of R&D procurement. So we are going to talk more about harnessing the power of technology, and we are going to focus not on investigator grants, but on the clinical service providers environment. So we are at booth 200. We are giving demos, we're giving presentations, and we are finalists in Best in Show. So if you like my presentation, if you are using Clinical Maestro happily, please vote for us. Very important for a young company to be recognized for its innovation in the industry. So I'm going to start with the very obvious. I've given this very slide last year in my scope presentation, and nothing has really changed in between in terms of the industry's predominant usage of Excel, both on the service provider side and on the sponsor side, to manage critical aspects of clinical business operations. So what does it really mean? There's a high cost of doing nothing. And we're just talking about the high cost of doing nothing in the wonderful Medidata presentation. There are CRO oversight challenges due to the fact that we cannot easily access information related to the CRO performance, for example. The change orders and budget overruns we just discussed right now, partly because of our ability to plan clinical studies and run scenarios that are closer to the reality of that particular study. These costly startup delays. We all know phase 3 trials they notoriously take months in the upfront negotiations at an RFP level, and that is even in situations of preferred partnerships. You go further, of course, we talked about the inability to analyze historical data. Why so? It's because of the lack of standardization we just talked about right now. We are all sitting on a data trove of information that we do not leverage in order to drive decisions intelligently. And of course, unscalable infrastructure, and there are many root causes to all of these. But if I can point out to two, the first one, I think it's the most relevant. It's simply a sheer lack of technology that covers sustainably the realm of clinical business operations. There are very few investments and very few new names that have come to the market. And then lack of business intelligence for clinical services pricing, which is also a paradigm on the investigator side, that is changing. It's obviously causing a lot of these challenges throughout the realm of clinical outsourcing. So, can we afford this? I like to do guessing game, but we don't have time today. But I will say we can't afford it, and I'll tell you why. More than $20 billion are spent on simply RFP management. There are more than 50,000 RFPs that go out on an annual basis between 10,000 plus sponsors and 10,000 plus suppliers. And the average cost of an RFP combined CRO and sponsor is exceeding $400,000. Actually, the chief revenue officer from a leading CRO, I shall not name, a couple of years ago came on stage and he said they have done an extensive analysis of the cost of creating and managing a proposal from a sponsor on a phase 3 trial, and the internal cost was over $350,000. And that takes into account the early work in preparing the RFP, the proposal resources, the internal resources within the CRO space, the presentation, the multiple bidding rounds, you name it. And you put all the due diligence that the sponsor spent, and then 400,000, it's an underestimate. You go further to spend another 10 more billion. Guess on what? Sheer qualifications. I've got this number actually from OCT San Francisco last week, sitting in Diligent Pharma presentation. And I've done some research, and again, an underestimate of how expensive it is to onboard and qualify new vendors. I know that as a CEO of a tech company, we spend enormous amount of time responding to RFIs, to technical questionnaires, and I would say easily 90% of the questions are irrelevant, or never read in perspective by whomever requested them, or they do not apply to the particular area that we play in. You add another $5 billion, that's just easily what it costs to run governance. And that is the cost of meetings, it's the cost of putting together the KPI dashboards. I know I like to move, and the microphone is here. That is a very expensive undertaking. But then the biggest number of all, more than 200 billion. I'm curious if there is any idea of what that number is. This comes from 2021, so it's probably inflation adjusted higher than this. So it's the cost of getting inspection readiness. It's the cost of the industry non-compliance to vendor oversight regulations. So the question is, can we really afford the status quo? And I say, no, we can't afford it. And this is what Clinical Maestro is all about. We are trying to cut a dent into that humongous spend by bringing solutions to the industry that drive efficiency and cost savings in the core pillars of clinical business operations. So we started with Portfolio, our first product in 2019. It's about what-if scenario analysis. It's about cost prediction, and we are very proud to have the most advanced and most accurate cost prediction engine in the industry. Then we continued into source, because sourcing is such a major activity in clinical trials. It's the process of creating RFPs, sending them back, receiving the answers, doing due diligence, and we build a solution that's fit for purpose. It's not another GP, it's not another Ariba. It is a fit for purpose solution. And I wrote an article not too long ago. I bet no one read it in this audience, but I know we got quite a bit of readership, which is, why can't you use Expedia to book a hair appointment? I wish. It's a booking site. But booking a hair appointment requires different parameters than booking a flight. So sourcing technology is no different. In the area of precision medicine, why would you use generic solutions to apply to the sourcing environment, and then at the end of the day, you use them as glorified email exchanges, and you are not actually operating in the model that your industry or your particular process requires. Late 2021, we launched LEAD. It's a newer product in our portfolio. LEAD is about out-of-scope tracking and the automation of the CNFs, or out-of-scope trackers, through process. And last year in Q4, we launched Vision. So a lot of the discussion today is around Vision, and it's around bringing the next generation tools for clinical vendor management. We've also expanded the usage of Clinical Maestro. We started by being a clinical outsourcing team tool. This is no longer the case. We have situations in which we have more than 60 users of Clinical Maestro in a single company. And they are not all in clinical outsourcing. In fact, they represent project management, clinical operations, finance, vendor management, procurement. And because it is a role-based system, each party is going in to look for a particular scope. So for example, finance people may log in to see the status of out-of-scope activity, while general procurement people may go in to see the sourcing volume. for example, on a certain category, on a specific vendor. And Clinical Maestro has become a unifier of those different components. And there are many reasons why, because there is something in it for everyone, and I'm not listing here all of the departments, but sourcing people, they have the ability to set up their own bid grids, and we highly encourage them to actually use Clinical Maestro, because if we are going to take a stab at standardization, we can't be constantly standardizing by using our old processes, because there's no standardization at all. Bid grid mapping, we're very proud of that, and that's one of the features we are competing for at Best in Show. We are using an AI engine to do the mapping between sponsor unique bid grids and CRO unique bid grids in order to find that common language. Clinical specific bidding modes, very important, because boy, we made our life very complicated. It's bid to resources, it's bid by region, it's fixed units, it's variable units, it's a combination of everything in between. And having a bid database, to the lady that asked a question in the back, that allows you to bring in analytics. Whether there is a report we have out of the box, whether you have Power BI or another tool or Tableau, or it's another report that we can pull for you. It's about that visualization. And that's only possible if the data is standardized and sitting in a database and not in SharePoint, in Excel. Clinical operations, of course, they are part of that scenario planning. That's so important. Run scenarios on your protocol before you send it out to the CRO. Do not rely entirely on the CRO to propose you the operational plan. Because it's so very important that you take that baby protocol that you've taken so much care of and run it through possible scenarios as opposed to rushing into a wording within 2 weeks. Vendor management, it's about taking back governance. So important to be in control, and you will see I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of our vendor management survey. Most sponsors feel that they are not in control of their vendor governance, and you will see why. And we talked about some of the benefits of finance being able to see the data flow from the early planning to the actual study budgets to the change orders throughout the life cycle of the study. So now I want to tell you a bit more about our newest product vision. We launched it last year, and we have 3 major releases this year. One is coming in March, one sometimes Q2, one sometimes Q4. So I want to tell you why I'm so excited about this project, about this product, and why it's well deserving of winning Best in Show. So we all know the industry pain points around vendor management. I like to say it's the 2. It's too much effort. It's too many systems. There are too many owners. There is too much effort to pull data from different systems or to use a unified Excel tracker to figure out who's working on which study and for how much. So these pain points are not new. They've been around for a long while. I experienced them myself running governance, both on the CRO side and on the sponsor side. We are really trying to fix the fundamental problem, the fundamental challenges in vendor management. So to validate these points, we ran an industry survey. We launched it a tad late. So we launched it in December, actually late December, when over Christmas nobody was doing surveys. So we've got some answers in January. It's going to run throughout the end of Q1. So if you have a chance, please do submit your responses, because there is almost no research in the industry and almost no thought leadership around clinical vendor management. So this is what we get as an initial data cut. So we got 40-some responses, 46 to be precise. 20% from CROs, I was very happy to see that. I would like that number to be bigger, because CROs play a huge role in governance. About 80% from pharma, And out of the 80%, 60% were mid to large. So first, we asked a bit about the demographics, like how many vendors do you manage? So you can see most of them, 54%, between 100 and 500 vendors. That is a lot of vendors, with 8% more than 500. And you shouldn't be surprised, because you take a look at scope and how many exhibitors are out there. I don't know, 200, I'm one of them, but and not everybody's at scope. So a lot of vendors to manage, okay? So we ask, how do you do it? How do you actually manage the vendors? Okay, let's take a look. 17% Excel only. 67 Excel plus other systems, because I have a QA system, because my IT department uses a certain RFI engine. We know SurveyMonkey is very popular. It's very popular for site feasibility, for that matter. It's very popular for lessons learned, but it's not a tool designed to support clinical vendor management. And then 17% had a central vendor management system, and we had a follow-on question. If you have a central vendor management system, what do you have? And most of the answers were either a generic solution or a custom-built solution. And we know the industry is migrating away from custom builds, because who's going to maintain them, right? IT departments have been slashed. So now look at this question. How happy are you with your current infrastructure? High level of unhappiness. 65% said we could do much better. It's really painful to manage vendors in today's environment with today's tool set. And then, hey, I'm not going to go over these line by line, but if you look, what are the biggest pain points? Let's look at the bottom two. 62.5% said KPIs tracking is a pain in the butt. How about vendor risk tracking? You'll see it ties to one of the questions that we asked. It's a big challenge. So you move further and you say, how easy is it to actually manage the spend? And when I say manage the spend, I don't know how many sponsors are in this room. And again, I like to do the guessing game, but we can't due to time. But vendor spend is being able to say, hey, how much business do I have with, let's say, IQVIA overall? And IQVIA may do consulting for me, might be working on different studies, might be doing a variety of services beyond just CRO, maybe working with different departments. And I challenge you that most sponsors cannot easily go in a system and say, I'm spending 100 million. And if they have governance, it's primarily for the CRO piece. It's not comprehensive for the entire spend of that entity. So if you go further and say, how about vendor performance? Is it easy to track? No, it's difficult, say 51%, or it takes a lot of effort and it needs fact checking, because another question we asked is who is actually preparing the governance stack? Who is preparing the sponsor or the CRO? 80% said is the CRO. So the CRO doesn't have vendor management tools either. So even if the sponsors say mid-level effort, someone on the CRO side is pulling the data up to the last minute before the governance meeting and is doing it manually. Further, what's your approach to risk management? Hey, this is a conservative industry. And to say 62% are reactive and not proactive, that tells me a lot. It gives a lot of insights. And again, I'd like to have 1,000 answers to this survey. But we'll get there, at least 100, let's say. But this is a big exclamation point, or big alert that we are so reactive in managing vendor risk when, in fact, we are such a risk-adverse industry. That's why it's costing the industry $200 billion in non-compliance. And then final cut, we had some 24 questions, and then in total, another 15 to 20 follow-up questions. But one was, if you were to design an ideal vendor management system, what would it look like? What features would it have? And you can see KPI tracking, number one wish. If we could build a system that's going to give me the beautiful visualizations, hey, please give it to me. Take us out of the CRO producing the metrics one way this quarter and another way the different quarter. Risk alerts, very important, no wonder, because we are so reactive to risk. And having a central hub for information, being able to do qualification at the category level, and then being able to survey, maybe outside SurveyMonkey, if possible, in the same solution. So we are listening to what the industry wants. It's absolutely fundamental. And we use an approach which is called customer-led product advancement, which is we start with a feature, we release it to the customers. It may be an imperfect feature, but who are we to judge? It's our customers using it that are going to give us a feedback. It needs to change in this way or in that way. We listen and we deploy it in the next release or in an upcoming release. So the customers are, in fact, building our product. We had our share of merit at the beginning, but that's no longer in our hands, the future roadmap of the product. So when we started doing vision, we thought about intelligence. And we built it with the luxury of today, that you can put the fanciest technology behind a product in a completely different way than you could have even 5 years ago when we started building portfolio. So we have the luxury of building with the customers and using the latest technology. And look, we are trying to cover vendor management. That's no easy undertaking. So we broke it down in these beautiful bubbles, which is our digestible pieces. So we started with category management last year, which is establishing that central hub, being able to go and find your vendor spend in one place. Then we are moving towards new vendor qualification and risk scoring. Both of these are coming in Q2. Very important because not only qualification is costing us a lot of money. There are companies that do offer the qualification engine, which is wonderful, but there is a good amount of companies who want to do the qualification themselves. So it's about giving the industry choices, and we are building the choice for do-it-yourself, which is most likely the case of mature organizations who have specialized staff that can run it. And then towards the end of Q4, and that's going to be my next year presentation at Scope, we are launching the KPI dashboard. If you have ideas on how to do that, I mentioned customer-led product advancement. Come on board. We take the silliest idea, and we've got amazing ideas from the customers and from our audiences. What we are trying to do is replace the infamous Excel trackers, focus on oversight, and create a solution that connects with your entire ecosystem. So, boy, this is a busy one, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I don't have a pointer. This is a generic case study because not every organization is set up the same way. Not everybody has the same type of departments. But if you look at the major players in vendor management, which are clean ops, clinical outsourcing, and clinical vendor management, there is a lot of work that is highly inefficient, starting from the top, meaning keeping the category strategy in Excel or in multiple solutions, as I mentioned. Clinical operation not being able to have self-service. They don't. They need to call someone and say, what's the vendor status? And they call the outsourcing lead or they send an email. Outsourcing being at risk of starting another RFP for a vendor that may not be fully onboarded or qualified for that particular category. And we talked about the KPIs being a challenge with the CROs, the over-reliance on the CROs, and having the information dispersed in so many different systems. So that's where we are going. So this is an actual screenshot of the solution of the release that's coming now in March. I say picture says 1,000 words. So if you look there on top, you'll have a pretty good idea of what you can do in vision. So this is an image of the profile of a particular vendor that gives a snapshot of the therapeutic area focus, the categories, where they are on a particular qualification process, but the system pulls proposal and agreement data. If you use our sourcing solution, you can pull the data right from our solution. But if you don't, then we can pull the data from a different system, so you log in a single hub. Audit and qualification, most likely you have a solution in place. So Clinical Maestro can be your single source of truth. It can be the primary originator of the data, but it can also pull data from another system. Governance, we already have the engine to track the meetings, but the KPIs are coming in the fall. And then, of course, having a library of documents and being able to have that fluid communication with your service providers, very important. This is a sneak peek of a vendor qualification workflow. I love this one, and I played with it extensively in prototype mode. And the reason I like it so much, it's because it's super intuitive. And that's the first time we are actually showing this screenshot. So it starts from the top. Let's say you have a vendor that you want to qualify in data management. It's a completely new vendor. You just met a scope right now. So you take that vendor, and then you assign an owner. I'm going to give it to Brenda. And then she's going to be assigned that task of entering the vendor in the database, that someone else is going to assign the category. And then we have a particular survey that's associated with that category, so it can go into the qualification mode. And then you can see step by step, there is not only an assigned party, there is a task that has a completion date, and that follows a completion path. So ultimately, all the stakeholders work in concert in an actually easy-to-play application, and easy is very important. And this is where we are going with vendor performance management, which is having the sponsors drive the KPI dashboard, not the CRO. But hey, we love to sell vision to the CROs. So if you are going to still be the one doing it on the other side, why not use the technology to enable you locking those formulas and the visualization that you need in order to drive governance. So I'm told I have 5 minutes to go. So this is our vision of how vendor management can be. You have a single unified system that is going to drive category strategy, is going to drive qualification, onboarding, and KPI performance. What are the advantages? Hey, it's no-brainer, right? It's less of the too much effort and too much lack of transparency. Is bringing quality, savings, visibility, and communication to such a major area of running clinical business operations and running clinical trials. So I'm going to leave you with some thoughts on the 20+ use cases of AI/ML that we are testing, deploying, and playing with at Clinical Maestro. So planning and budgeting, very similar to what Medidata is doing. Once you have the data, and we are sitting on a large repository of data, you can run optimization scenarios, not just a new scenario, but the data can suggest the right scenario. To Chris's question, how likely is that this country mix is going to be holding up, for example? And it, of course, it has applicability both on the service and the investigator grant side. If you're looking at bidding, we released a bid grip mapping. We are playing with spend management, which is, again, having that risk alert that you are likely to be 40% under, for example. That's an insight that the data can give you, and that is important to justify and to negotiate with your service providers. So it's the entire process of automating the RFP creation, the vendor selection, and hey, contract review is one of the lowest hanging fruits in the usage of generative AI. We can do a much better job than going through 5 rounds of MSA reviews, negotiating clauses that should not even be there, for example. Management. AI is perfect for deviation analysis because it can detect historical trends and suggest what the deviations could be. It's about proactively anticipating potential overruns. And in oversight, it's about seamless onboarding and compliance management, which is what I was talking about with my vision presentation. So I want to leave you with a thought. Between sponsors and service providers, you can negotiate every possible aspect of your relationship, right? You can negotiate your rate cards, you can negotiate your operating model, your resource allocation, your fixed units, your variable units, your bid grid structure. And then if you can sit on top of the data, the bid data from that particular service provider, there is absolutely nothing preventing the sponsor to be able to create their own proposal. And you could almost reverse it as you send it to the CRO and say, hey, do you agree? And challenge them to disagree, actually, because the data and the proposal that you can create, it ultimately comes from their own data and from their own trends. Then if we can reverse that environment, what would that mean to how we staff clinical outsourcing departments, how we staff proposal management teams, and the entire journey from protocol to actually contract, which should become largely mechanics. So I know I got the zero shut up sign. So that was it. Stop by our booth, vote for us for Best in Show, change the way you operate today. Because we are on a new journey of R&D procurement. And hey, if you want to ask me a question, please do so.
Thank you so much, Anca. If there's any questions, we have time for at least one or two. If not, please do step by the booth.
So, hey, Anca, I think this is amazing and something that the industry is, obviously, it's a huge black hole. I'm curious, though, when you are looking at sponsors to take this ownership, have you come across sponsors who don't have the infrastructure to be able to manage that process? Because we do, well, I'm not on the sponsor side anymore, but when I was, not all the time are you given the infrastructure to be able to continue that process, and that's why we rely on the CROs a lot. So we get in this catch-22, right? So I'm just curious how if you see that, and if so, how they're handling it.
Yeah, we see that. I mean, you saw the survey results. Only 17% of the sponsors had a system, whatever that system may be. And when asked about how much they like their current infrastructure, they don't like it very much. So obviously, this is a systemic problem in the industry. And the reason why sponsors delegate heavily to CROs, it's because they don't have the infrastructure to manage it in-house. And we know, and I challenge many sponsors to look at their vendor management costs. Why are you outsourcing vendor management to the CRO? Because the CRO is not better equipped than you. And I don't know how many CROs are here to contradict me, but they don't have the same level of professionalism in an outsourcing department as the sponsors do. And it's costing a hell of a lot of money to delegate that vendor management to a CRO, as opposed to taking it in-house. So the industry needs these tools, but they're not one-sided. The CROs need it, and the sponsors need it. And we need to find that common language so we can understand, I speak in Chinese and you answer in French, and we understand each other. And that's where generative AI can help translate.
Anca, I would add to that. I also work with Anca. Thank you. That we also have people on our staff that will come in and sit alongside the sponsors team. So we do a tremendous amount of onboarding. We have consultants, and we have professional services that can also come along and supplement that headcount.
Anca, I mentioned in the last round the standardization aspect. Everyone that works in outsourcing or business operations knows how much work it is to map all of this stuff. And can you speak a little bit about your success, especially with the CROs around this topic? Because I think this is where it really starts to get inefficient. And for me, with your tool, I expect that the CROs really work, and the sponsors work with you to standardize some of this. So can you speak to that?
Yes, it's a challenge. And the major challenge is that the industry was not able to come together as a consortium to drive standardization. We were able to do it in other areas. Say, we have CDISC, we have the DIA ETMF standards. There are multiple use cases of successful standardization in the industry. We have codes, CPT codes for investigator grants. We weren't able to bring the CROs and the sponsors together to really agree what project management means. And should it include meeting management or not? Should meetings be part of project management or not? Should prep time be included in meeting or not? So all of the nuances that would make the industry operate in a transparent way, we have not achieved that goal. My hope is by putting forward the standard and having more and more adoption on that standard, you are going to drive standardization from within. But we come across cases in which, we show clinical maestro standard and they are like, but for the last 15 years, we've been using this. And then we look at their bid grid and like, you kidding me? This is like so complicated, it's so convoluted. It's like it could be streamlined and it's pulling teeth to drive the change. The beauty of the bid grid mapping is that it can do some of the bridging. So you can work with the CRO to do some matching, and now we can do it using AI, of the most common tasks. But the CROs don't have the house in order either. And look how many acquisitions and consolidations have happened recently. That means ICON inherited the PRA bidding structure, and Fortria, and every other CRO is struggling with achieving standardization themselves. So I am cautiously optimistic in terms of achieving standardization in the next 10 years. Will we achieve it? I think so, because ultimately, who can afford the cost of the status quo? So, the AI can find. You can teach the tool to find project management, manage projects, whatever. So you can find the matching, but finding the matching is still maintaining the lack of standardization. So. It takes this industry, this audience, I wish this room was full, to say, hey, we are going to standardize starting tomorrow.
And also adding on to that, one of the things that I'm starting to sketch out, Anca, and I have to continue and still blow it out, you want to start proactively going to the CROs and getting them, because they all have grids for each individual sponsor, so why not have a grid developed for Maestro?
Yeah.
And that starts to move that needle and slowly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We are having some box lunches. There's no actual lunch presentation in this room today. We start up back in here at 2:20. I think there's a bunch down by Sand Lake if you're looking for a lunch. And yeah, thank you so much.